Thanks for joining for this episode of the TechSpective Podcast. I've got with me Myke Lyons from Cribl. So, Myke, if you would like to, introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background on you and a little bit of background on Cribl.
Fantastic. So nice to meet you today, Tony. I appreciate the time we have together. So my name is Myke Lyons, as you mentioned. I'm based on the East Coast of the U.S. in the lovely state of Connecticut. I've been in the CISO of Cribl for just over a year. We are the data engine for IT and security. And really what that means and what I joined Cribl as a CISO is I got my start in logging as a security professional. And Cribl is one of those companies that helps, one of the very few companies that helps dealing with security telemetry pipelining and very specific to the logging space. So I feel like I've come full circle after starting 25 years ago.
Okay. Well, so, and I will say, like, I've seen the brand around. I've never really dove in to see, like, well, what is Cribl all about? But I'm definitely familiar with the name. I mean, I've seen it everywhere. As I looked into it more in preparation for our time right now, I guess the thought that kind of came to mind for me was a little bit of like a Rosetta Stone of sorts for data telemetry, and I've dealt with that on a number of different levels over the years in terms of, you have different platforms that call things different things, or and just trying to rationalize data across different tools and platforms is can be challenging because different things, you might have one piece of data and it's called different things depending on what's looking at it. So am I in the ballpark there of saying that that at least part of what you're doing is normalizing that, rationalizing that, so that I can talk on a level playing field?
Yes, and maybe I could even expand on it a bit. Servers generate logs and applications generate logs, and lots of different pieces of equipment that we use in our infrastructure to provide our application services, businesses, et cetera, to make them successful. They generate information. The challenge is that logging standards are typically done on a company by company basis, and so that's one. Acquisitions happen in the software space on a continuous basis, and then frankly, some data that is generated or telemetry information that is generated by these systems has different value to me at different times, and storage has varying costs, and so does processing. And so what we're able to do, and what I'm able to do because I'm a customer of our own stuff, is I can send the data that I need to be indexed, quickly correlated, and alerted on right to the top, to the most expensive system that I have that is best able to, in fact, actually, give me the quick response. Then there's a second tier where it's things that I'm going to run my investigations against. That might be the second tier of data. That might go to the slightly less expensive location. So think data lakes, a security data lake or something like that. And then there's another tier that's, things that I have to keep for compliance reasons, but I may never need to pull them back. I may need to pull them back, but I may never need to pull them back. And I have to keep them for some retention requirement. Could be 7 years, for example, is one of the financial services. And then there's data that I just don't need. It's generated. It could be debug logs. It's something that maybe my application just generates it, and I don't need it right now. And so I'm going to drop it. But if at some point in time I want to change that, I have that luxury of being able to do that. Now, that's just three, in theory's destination, right? One is dev null, but the others are other destinations. What if I want to have multi-destination? What if between teams we want to be able to split and send information to over here so that I can train a model that I'm currently using and I only want this discrete thing? What if I want to fix the data because I only need the timestamp and I need the timestamp in a format? Well, maybe I can rewrite it and send it over. What if I want to compress it before I move it? The large challenge that exists in the space, which has existed as long as I've been in security, which is a while, is we used to just have to consume whatever we were given. and we didn't get a whole lot of choice with it, and then we would have to access it. Now I can send it, manipulate it, I can truncate it, I can shrink it down, normalize it, I can do all those things once, twice, 10 times, 100 times, however I need to for my business needs. And at the same time, I can do it without having to have a lock-in to a particular vendor. Say, SIM vendor A versus SIM vendor B. I'm not necessarily locked into their ability to do this. I have this other layer of abstraction. So it's a great space to be in. It's also a great opportunity for our security customers and our IT customers to get better usage out of their data.
All right. Good background on Cribl specifically and what you do. So one of the things that has been sort of a trend recently, just in security in general, and that I kind of wanted to chat about is a focus on retail. Like there has been, we had Victoria's Secret, we had Neiman Marcus. There've been a couple of other ones. Right now, this week, as we're recording, is Amazon Prime Days. We've got right around the corner will be Cyber Monday and such, and so with the attacks on like Victoria's Secret and Neiman Marcus that have already happened, and these like big retail shopping, I don't know what you want to call them, and they're really holidays, but but
events.
Events, yes, we'll go with events. What are your thoughts on kind of the threat landscape for that, and how the threat actors are targeting these things and using AI to fuel further incidents?
So there's attackers were quick to jump on AI, maybe quicker than most of us were to jump on AI capabilities. I had a friend recently. Her daughter, who's she's my niece actually, but my niece's mom was trying to buy her a sweatshirt, and she was on Instagram, and they were going to buy this sweatshirt from this brand that's pretty common. It's a gray sweatshirt. It may or may not have gray in the name. And effectively, she thought that she was purchasing and acquiring, this gray sweatshirt, right? This gray whatever sweatshirt. And when it showed up, it clearly didn't have all the magical packaging and all the things that my niece was expecting when she was getting this brand of shirt that she was looking for. And so we reached out and very quickly realized that what had occurred there was that this particular retailer on a social media app had basically stolen, you can insert a lot of words here, they'd probably mostly be accurate, had basically stolen the whole brand of this company. It was mirroring as though they were the brand being represented and sold. And so this thing showed up, which, mind you, is an interesting piece of business, but it was not legitimate. It was a forgery item. But the whole look and feel and all those things. First off, when we went back and looked retroactively, because I'm the cyber family member, right? We went and looked at the things there. It was very clear that this was not a human who had rebuilt or copied the brand and page. This was just a very quick, very quick and dirty LLM-based, rewriting, borrowing, copying, and building of a page. And the page was clearly not written by someone who's written a lot of web pages before. And I mean, the interface on the mobile side. So, one is fraud, right? Impersonation, fraud, things along those lines. The second is that you're hearing a lot of, service centers, things like that, like returns frauds and things like that are occurring. I think that's a large challenge that retail should expect. And then, not retail specific, but very much impacting retail and other businesses, are these fraudulent IT worker attacks that are occurring. And these are people that that go through your hiring process. You think they go through the background screenings. They may or may not actually show up to work. Maybe they show up to work and they use a deep fake to represent what they looked like on the ID that they had faked, or maybe they're using that to actually generate part of their work. And through the interview process, they're leveraging AI to answer questions on their ability to write code. And it's amazing how many different AI type attacks. Then obviously we can dive into some of the other more interesting retail scenarios with with the bots that are trying to reduce support and things like that. But there's a lot of different threats facing these folks.
Yeah, and I think whether you're the retailer or the consumer, I think even just as you just described it, there's a lot of different elements there. I mean, there's sort of the brand fraud of it, but you can have anything ranging from kind of just straight up fraud and kind of misrepresenting what you're buying, but at least there is a transaction and you end up with something, versus an actual like all out cyber attack and actual like intercepting of funds or whatever. Why do you have any thoughts on why now? Like why are cyber criminals seeming to focus more on retail, large retailers in 2025?
I think the technology and tools that are available to them allow them to scale quickly. And retail is a very large sector, an exceptionally large sector. I also think that retail specifically is in many cases their interaction with their customer bases are emotional, right? They're in positive ways. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean a positive way. It's a positive emotional experience when you acquire something that you want to acquire, or you're able to provide someone else something on their behalf. And a lot of these things are celebratory events. And so it caters well to scale, to hit on some of those unsuspecting folks more opportunistically, right? So if I can do 100,000 attacks and I have 100,000 or a million people or 100 million people out there that are actively buying things, these types of new tools that are out there allow for scale to occur quicker. So it's easier for them to do those things. I think that's first and foremost. And I think that frankly, the brands are well known, and these retailers in so many instances are household names. I can tell you that there's probably in my family I'll make up a number, say 40 people in my family. I bet you 3 of them actually know what the heck a Cribl is. The rest of them have no idea. But if I was to say Victoria's Secret, I guarantee 37 of them will be able to tell you who Victoria's Secret is. And maybe the young ones who haven't learned to speak yet, they're the only ones who can't say Victoria's Secret. So household names are ones that they look like great targets. They're salacious, they're known, and they're comfortable for you to start to look at, and they have a presence. I think that's also an important part of it. They have a physical presence, very pronounced internet presence, even in brick and mortar sense, right? Also have a large brick and mortar presence. I think that plays a big part.
For sure. And but also in my head though, like there, for years, the kind of number one thing has been ransomware. And companies having to be worried about that. And I can totally understand and see why a threat actor would target a Neiman Marcus or a Victoria's Secret with a ransomware attack, or target Amazon with a ransomware attack right around Prime Days. It's like, because it's like then there's a dramatically added incentive to resolve that quickly. It's like when you attack a hospital or whatever. It's like, well, the hospital has a vested interest in making sure that is resolved as quickly as possible because they've got patients they need to take care of, and it adds a heightened sense of urgency to pay the ransom or do something over, say, a business that just makes doorstops. Like the world would be fine without some doorstops for a little while. So that part makes sense to me. But in some of these cases, they're not necessarily all ransomware attacks. I mean, there's different types of attacks. From what you have seen, or even with these specific attacks, how are threat actors using? You already talked about how the attackers kind of jumped on AI pretty quickly and maybe ahead of the curve of the commercial space. So how are they using the AI when it comes to being able to increase the frequency, increase the speed, the scale, the sophistication of their attacks.
So most of the tooling that they're using, they're getting some fairly novel something off the shelf, and from that they're going to turn it into something that they should be able to leverage in a more specific or targeted way, and then cater it to bad actor A, so I can do these things. And unfortunately, vibe coding is very available to them, just as much as it is to the rest of us. They also, because AI is not perfect when it comes to writing code, far from it, honestly. And I think that many people understand that. However, attackers don't necessarily need to be perfect with their attack. They just need to be successful, and they have a lot of chances to get successful. They can keep trying, and unlike you or I, who wouldn't be able to get their job wrong every day, a lot of them can get their job wrong a lot and still, maintain employment, if you can call it, call it as such. So I think those are two big parts where they're enhancing it. The other one is if they're doing any sort of targeted attack, or if they're starting to peruse the internet to find a target. These AI capabilities are out there. These LLMs make it considerably easier. I can interrogate this bot, if you will, and interrogate them is probably the best way to say it. What do I would like to know all of the Cisco hardware, or insert some sort of router or firewall piece of equipment, or the largest purchaser, largest user, and that information is generally now available. So now I go with that. Then the second thing I might do is I might start to search through and see what versions of software that they're running out there. So I can take a combination of my Shodan results as a person running an investigation or just a discovery. I can take those things. I can take all of these various pieces of information that would traditionally have taken me weeks, months, maybe longer to gather. And very quickly, I can actually just put together a reasonable prompt of an LLM and get a pretty juicy target, especially if I know that these are what my skills are, or these are the tools that I have in my, my tool belt to launch an attack. I also think it's great that you brought up, ransomware as one of those particular attacks that can occur. The reality is, if you timed it around, we were speaking earlier about, Cyber Monday or Prime Day / week, I think they're turning it into now. If you were to target a retailer in and around these times, they're going to be much more willing to pay a top dollar, because they know exactly how much revenue is potentially going to be lost. Now, the attackers are also becoming so much more sophisticated that they're going to ask you for a ransom that is something that you can pay. Previously, they would just ask for a gajillion dollars, right? They'd make words up and ask for numbers. Now they're doing research and determining a business of your size and shape. You have cyber insurance, your cyber insurance coverage for cyber espionage or cyber extortion. Your coverage is $5 million. I'm going to ask you for $4,700,000 because I know you're covered, and you're like, well, you know what? My coverage is there. I've been paying the cyber insurer for so long. Therefore, my propensity to pay is considerably higher. If I know how much money you're going to generate every single day during Prime Day, Prime Week, I might target something that's a percentage of that, knowing full well that you're going to likely just hand that over, because from a bottom line perspective, it actually might make sense for you just to pay the ransom and get your stuff back up and running. There is some sophistication that's going on in there beyond that as well, which is there's a trust value, which I hate to say associate criminals with trust, but there's also a trust value when someone is encrypting your information from a ransomware attack. There's also a higher likelihood now than there was previously that they could actually reverse the encryption that they were putting out there. A lot of it was one-way street early doors. Now there's an integrity or an honor amongst thieves, if you will, in and around these things, where they have a higher likelihood that they can actually reverse the lock on your software or your data.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because I feel like that there's an ebb and a flow to that, because in the early days of ransomware, I feel like a lot of that stuff did exist, and I used to preach and tell people, like, when they'd say, well, should I pay the ransom? And I'm talking like early days of ransomware, where it's just targeting, just you, me, consumers. And it would be like, well, so if I click on the wrong link and my computer gets encrypted. And then, at the time they would only be asking for like $300, $500, whatever. And the conversation would come up, well, should I pay this? Is this just a scam? And I said at the time, 6, 7, 8 years ago, well, they have to give you your data back, because otherwise the entire business model fails. Like, as soon as you start having ransomware threat actors who do not follow through on getting your data back to you when you pay the ransom, nobody would pay the ransom. Like, you have to get the data back or it doesn't work. And now I realize, like you said, as that market got flooded, you had different levels of skill and sophistication amongst ransomware groups. And so there were definitely ransomware groups who were not as good at developing, and there were ransomware groups with different sets of ethics in terms of how to proceed. But I think that others would, and to borrow your term, the honor amongst thieves. I think that those that were kind of more established and didn't want the business model messed up, maybe put some pressure on the other ones to be like, look, you can't do that. Like, if they pay the ransom, you've got to figure out how to get their data back. And I think in a lot of cases, I remember a few years back, the situation was, if you're the threat actor, I'm gonna spend all my development resources making sure that my encryption, that my attack vector is as solid as possible, and that I lock your data down. Mm-hmm. The decryption part, I'll get to it if I get to it. Hopefully it works, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because I don't really care at that point. It's not as big a deal to me. And so I think when I was at Cyber Reason and we were doing reports on the ransomware market, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 50% of the time that even if you paid the ransom and you got the decryption tool, there was only a 50-50 chance it would work. Mm-hmm. Or you might get 60% of your data back, or it would work on some level, but it wouldn't really work. And in a lot of cases, there were companies that were paying the ransom and then still restoring from backup because they were like, all right, well, I'm going to pay the ransom so this ends, but your encryption tool sucks, so I'm going to, I'm just going to restore from backup and get back up and running.
Which is where I think a lot of them shifted their tactics to exploitation beyond just extortion. And when they would say things like, well, we're going to release all your internal emails, or we're going to release, all of your employee salary information, or your customer lists, and so we're going to impact your business. And so that not only was the encryption and lockdown of your software, of your data, one risk, but the second was they would threaten to call your customers. I remember one instance where there was some, I don't want to say impropriety because I don't remember the exact details of whether or not it was inappropriate, but they were effectively stating that, like, hey, we're going to contact the SEC and say that you've had a material cyber event and you haven't actually filed an appropriate statement, to that effect, right? And they would come back and say, well, we actually exploited you. You had to pay this. You need to alert your shareholders, and because you haven't, we're now going to get paid a reward from the SEC for reporting you for not exploiting this.
For reporting you for the attack that we launched in the first place.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I mean, all of those things. I mean, I do sometimes have to step back and give some credit where credit is due and kind of marvel at the creativity of the threat actors, because the first time I saw a quote unquote ransomware attack where there wasn't actually an encryption, and this is like end of 23, I think, maybe end of 22, I don't know, somewhere in there, but it was, you had something where the threat actors were basically like, hey, we've exfiltrated, we went from I've encrypted your data and I've exfiltrated your data. So you can't just restore from backup, because if you restore from backup, I'm gonna release your data, like you were just saying. So, but that was a second factor, second level extortion at that point. But then someone came along and said, hey, what if I just don't encrypt your data? We skip straight to the extortion. And I I remarked at the time that I thought that was kind of brilliant, because if I encrypt your data, if I lock down your network and I encrypt things, it raises alarm bells with employees, with executives, with the board, with customers, with partners, whoever. Like, it's hard not to notice when the whole network goes down. And that brings in a different level of scrutiny. So as we have this kind of debate back and forth about, should I, shouldn't I pay the ransom, et cetera, there are global sanctions implications, because sometimes you're paying the ransom. Like, well, what if you're paying the ransom and the threat actor is related to a terrorist group, or they're in a country that's sanctioned? It's like, well, now you've just violated international law to pay the ransom. So there's all these levels of scrutiny that go with paying the ransom. But if I just exfiltrate your data and then tell you, hey, listen, if you don't pay this ransom, I'm going to release the data. Well, now we can have this conversation just between friends, behind closed doors. Nobody else needs to know. I don't need to tell the board. The SEC doesn't need to be in on it. I can just pay the ransom and move on. And I thought that's a pretty brilliant way to go, because I mean, you as the threat actor, you just want the ransom. I mean, you just want to get paid. So if you can sort of help the victim, it should stay under the radar and pay the ransom without any unnecessary scrutiny, then more power to you. That
is what they're hoping for, right? That's what the attackers are hoping for the most part. And I know we were earlier mentioned the IT worker threat. That in some part is one of the plays that they have when they've made their way into an institution and have been employed, is not only are they trying to collect payment as an employee 5 times over to 5 different firms, and they're making pretty hefty sums of money. There, I think there was one individual who was making in salary terms alone $700,000+ a year, just with jobs that they were barely showing up to each day. But the next phase of that is to start to gather things like software companies. Let me grab your source code. If you're a consulting firm, let me grab your client lists. Let me grab the secret, the projects, this secret squirrel project that you were working on, and let me find out that what's in there. Let me scour through your mail store and look for salacious topics that I can just have queries in. And things like LLMs really unlock a lot of that capability, right? So you can start to develop some of those patterns and searches, and you can apply those things there. And it makes these longer plays, these theoretically longer plays, way easier for attackers in that regard. And then they could, in fact, extort you for some level of payment. And they're educated levels, right? So that's what I was saying earlier, like the amount of money they're going to ask for is not a number that you can't pay. They're going to find that number that hurts you just enough, right, but not so much so that you're not going to be willing to open the purse. Which is smart.
Like I said before, like if that's your business model, you do need to put some thought into that number. You need to say, okay, it has to be a number that the victim can afford. And the pain you're inflicting has to be enough that they can't afford not to, and that's the sweet spot you're looking for.
Precisely that. These attackers, unfortunately, are spending a lot of time and energy, I would say, on the wrong things. It's a shame they're not spending it in the right things and focused on those. But they're not stupid. Well, at least not all of them are stupid.
Yeah. Well, I had another thought, and I can't think of what it was, but when it comes to those attacks, no, totally lost it. So we'll move on because I had a thought, and then you said something that made me think of something else, and then I forgot the first thing.
We'll get there.
Let's bring it back though. Bring it back to, like I said, it is currently Prime Week. And what's funny about that now is that it went from Prime Day to Prime Days to Prime Week. but they're also not alone. Everyone has it now. So like Target's doing something, Walmart's doing something, everyone's doing something this week, to compete with Amazon and get in on the game. Are there, are there things that the Amazons and the Targets and the Walmarts should be doing? Are there specific attack vectors or tactics that they should anticipate and defend against, or is it just the same as it? I mean, it's just the same as it always is, but more intense.
It's a great question. I come from two different places here when I'm thinking about your question. The one is obviously people are going to buy from Amazon on Prime Week, or Amazon just generally, or they're going to be loyal customers to Target or loyal customers to Walmart or some of these other large retailers because they have a trust for the brand, they have a trust for the experience, and I think if they lose that trust, which is very easy to lose trust in anyone, it'd be very inconvenient for me if my shopping experience with one of those went awry. Maybe because I'm a security person, but I think people, just like restaurants, you go out and have a bad meal at a restaurant, you're probably not going back. If you go and have a bad retail experience with one of these, and theoretically a preventable retail experience with one of these retailers, you're probably not going to use them, especially because there are alternatives. They may be different. They may not be as exactly what you were used to, but you have alternatives. So I think that's really important for these retailers, is to maintain a trust with your customers, and that is that you give them what they feel like is a secure experience as a shopper, as a buyer of these things. And I think that with so much of direct to consumer and things like that going on in the world, I think there's an opportunity for the three you've mentioned to rise up and show up in a way that really does give me as a buyer a more secure sense. Now, that's one side. The other side is that as a person who's a member of an IT security team, SRE, or whatever the role that I have at one of these firms, there's a heightened level of challenge during these times because my traffic is higher. There's going to be weirder things just because people are going to be at lunch and all of a sudden sharing some crazy deal they found on the app, and therefore it's going to be a different buying behavior than they've seen normally, or the pattern, or the I'm going to buy this for someone, I'm going to ship it to their house. Oh, they just had a baby, I'm going to buy this other thing. So I think those user behaviors and the heuristics you have around those things and the various analytics that you have around those things, they will change during these sort of peak buying times, these sort of elevated retail times. So I think there's an enhanced level of awareness that they're getting ready for, and to do that you need to be able to scale, and that for them is going to be leveraging the latest technologies that are available to them. I think there's no other way to do that, because if you have 10 people, you can't turn to 20 on your busiest week and then go back to 10. The 10 you added to the team, they're not going to be the same as your core 10. It's just impossible. So you're either going to maintain a 20, which obviously has a bottom line impact, or you're going to figure out how to make those folks that you currently have on the team operate more efficiently and more effectively.
Okay. Well, so I think that I agree with that. And even as I was asking the question, honestly, I was envisioning, something I've discussed in the past, which is when we, a lot of times when a company gets attacked, however the attack happens, the meme is that they will almost inevitably immediately issue some sort of statement saying that it was a nation state threat. So like we're gonna blame China, and in the past, I've made the point of, okay, I acknowledge that getting attacked by, if you could, do the incident response and attribute and the attribution and actually prove that it was a nation state threat, I will acknowledge that the nation state threat groups have deeper pockets and more resources than your standard run-of-the-mill cybercrime group, and therefore that probably is a more sophisticated attack, or at least it has the potential to be a more sophisticated attack. But that's not an excuse. Like the public statement is always sort of like a shoulder shrug, like well, hey, it was a nation state threat. What are you going to do? And I'm like, well, no, as the security team, as the IT security professional, your job is to defend. Like, you don't get to shrug your shoulders just because of who the threat actor is. And that's, so I was thinking about that in terms of this as well, which is like, yes, you might have a higher volume of attacks, you might have a higher sophistication of attacks during something like Prime Week. Or around the holidays, retailers, will see more attacks because it's just prime time for the threat actors to attack. But that's not an excuse to fail. So it probably is just a matter of intensity more than anything, because it's not like they invented a new kind of attack for this week. They're just doing more of it or doing it better.
It's why if you attend a sporting event or something along those lines, there's things like turnstiles and man traps in data centers and other secure facilities, right? Because you want to be able to at one time, right? The same thing with TSA. If you float, last time you flown, got on a flight, it's a single experience, one-to-one. Challenge in retail is it's not necessarily so simple. It's actually way more complicated. With regards to the statement you made about the responses to a particular attack, I'm gonna say that I don't think many of those responses are written by our security brethren. I would state that many of them have a legal and I hold my best legal counsel near and dear to me because they're great, but there's a bunch of them out there that aren't great. So I would say in those instances, it's a very easy CYA just to blame, the boogeyman. Quite frankly, the boogeyman that's under the bed. It's super easy. Where you can blame something like luck, right? But in a cyber world, it's much easier just to say nation state actor, because it implies, as you said, sophistication, resources, or very deep resources, versus some creepy guy in the basement who's got nothing better to do and just wants to cause you a bad time.
Yeah, well, and no, I agree with you completely. I think I don't think I don't think those things generally are coming from actual incident responders. I don't think anyone is actually doing any attribution in those cases. I think it pretty much is a legal / crisis response boilerplate. But the if I put on my marketing hat, like the interesting thing about that is it's kind of all that matters, because by the time the dust settles and the investigation is done and the attribution is clearer and you have details of how they got in, when they got in, what happened, where did they take, by the time all of that pans out, we've moved on. There's been 10 other attacks since then. Nobody cares. So all that really matters is, what did your initial statement say?
Mm-hmm. That's the thing we could search out most quickly too. I think that's the easiest thing, right? That 8K filing. That's the those are the things that are easy for us that can live on in perpetuity, so we can search against those to look at them. There's been some recent responses that I think have been very good. I was a big fan of the Coinbase Coinbase's response, where they very quickly said, we rather than pay the ransom, we'd rather pay somebody else to find you and turn you into authorities. And I thought that was a bold move. It was a challenging breach nonetheless. Third party, it makes it even more challenging. Support systems, access to things, those sorts of complications. And then, the one who I'm thinking of will remain nameless, because it's not fair to name, don't know the whole team, don't know the whole situation. But then there's others that had sort of similar attacks that occurred, And quite frankly, their responses sucked. It was blame the customer. It was, as you said, like super sophisticated nation states. And then I looked at some of the customers that were largest impacted and had conversations with them. And, their feedback to me was, quite frankly, we told them about the fact that they were breached. And then when we did, they kind of half disagreed with us in the beginning until they realized they were in fact breached. And then the statement to the rest of us was, you're not impacted. Oh, well, you were actually impacted. We just didn't have the resource to respond to you at that point. So it was easier for us to say you weren't impacted until we had some time for you, right? And so it's important to get that right and not, legal wash the statement, but allow people to continue to defend themselves now with the new heightened awareness around the fact that one of their partners was impacted.
Yeah. Well, kind of, I guess is a slight shift, but one of the things that I was thinking about too is that as we talk about retail, and obviously, I mean, people are buying stuff all day, every day online, and or whatever. So online retail is a huge market. But if you believe current headlines and where things are heading, we're going to start having agentic AI that's going to automate these things for us, and that well, it's funny because everything that makes life easier for you also makes it easier for the attackers. I've said that forever. Mikko Hipponen wrote a whole book about it. But it's true. Like if it makes it easier for me to automate, buying concert tickets or buying airfare or whatever, it also becomes an attack vector. And so as we start to roll that stuff out, I have to say I'm skeptical, very cautious about that. Like I don't really know that. Even though I keep seeing stories about how great this agentic AI is going to be on a consumer level, I'm not talking about what you do in a company, but on a consumer level, the ability for me to have the AI assistant in my smartphone know these things and just automatically do these things. It's like, well, in order to do that, there's all kinds of privacy levels that have to be, I have to have a lot of trust, with that whole process, because I have to give it access to everything about me, everything about my calendar, everything about my banking. It's got to have access to actually process the transaction, and that opens up a lot of risk if that gets compromised. If as soon as a threat actor gets a hold of my AI agent, all bets are off.
So it's interesting you say that, and it reminds me, so I had it's Friday here, and I had lunch with my wife and a couple of friends, as we try to do on Fridays, is quickly get together after everyone has a week. And today someone was asking a question about Chinese New Year. We were just talking about the various animals and what was the animal in your year of birth, and if that happened a year ago or 2 years ago, they all would have gone to their favorite search engine, probably would have been Google, and they would have for a couple of minutes each would have crafted their own. Well, we had 2 Geminis and a ChatGPT within 5 people that just instantly, they didn't even think twice about loading an LLM to find out information. So, and these are none of one's a school teacher, the other person owns a personal security business, the other person is an audiologist. So these are people that have no occupational overlap at all, right? They are consumers of each other's services in many ways. These are friends and people that we care about. But a year ago, it was only being able to go to a search engine, and it would take them 5 searches or 4 searches and 5 link readings. Now, how fast that they can unlock all of this information is, and the muscle memory for these folks is to use these things. I can't imagine where it's going to be. Now, I say that because I think what's really important for us as technologists, and even more important as security practitioners ourselves, is that we can't stick our fingers in our ears and yell la la la. We have to be faster than they are. Not to be mean to my my chemistry teacher friend or my audiologist friends, but I need to be able to do that faster than they can do that, because the attackers are doing it all day long. So what I have been proposing to folks for the past few months, if not a little bit longer, is that you spend a few minutes a day exploring these technologies and using these technologies so they become part of your response capabilities. You have to have some trust with them. I use a technology that allows me to switch between models, and sure, things like MCP are all of the conversation right now, in many cases all of the practice right now, depending on how you're doing integrations and agents to agents. Authentication for agent is really, agentic authentication is really important, and how you're, getting that down to a discrete level. But the only way that we're going to get better at it is not just looking at architectural models, not just going through our design reviews, not just doing our threat modeling for the particular application, but actually just using it and making it part of our practice and developing that muscle memory, so that when we are seeing an attack that might be in a way that is new to us, we are moderately comfortable with the constructs, the way these things respond, the way the text is generated, or the way the image is created, or the way the video or the audio or whatever the case may be. We're familiar with how the tech works. As that's a basic one, is the search. But as you get into email use cases, as you said, and there's so many other integrations that are going to exist and continue to exist. I'm not saying give all your personal information over to an LLM by any means. Please don't do that. But what I am saying is you do need to practice some of this stuff, whether it's practicing forced practice. If you want to be a fake piano player, by all means, right? You just go practice piano all the time, but just never tell anybody you're a piano player. Go for it, right? But you do need to use these things continuously, so you become more comfortable and less intimidated when these things happen.
No, that's very fair. And one of the things I've noticed, it's one of these things that I sort of knew it before, but didn't really put a name to it until generative AI came on the scene. But with generative AI, the prompt, how you phrase the prompt is important. And so, we can both say we're using ChatGPT, or we can both say we're using Perplexity, whatever we want, pick a tool. But our results are going to vary depending on how we interact with it and what the query is. And then it was at that point that I was like, oh, you know what? That's always been true of Google too. For 2 decades now, we've been saying, oh, I Googled it, or someone asks you a question, you say, I don't know, did you Google that? And it's like, well, as a generality, that is a fair question, but also, how did you Google it? Because that matters. And at least with Google, then you have to, in particular, and maybe with the generative AI as well, you have to also throw in the bias of the algorithm and what it knows about you. Because I can say I Googled it, I'm going to get results tailored for Tony Bradley. You can say you Googled it, you're going to get results tailored for Myke Lyons, and we might have used the exact same query. We're still going to get different results because it's trying to serve us what it thinks we want, which is it's one of those things that I feel is simultaneously a pro and a con. I get it; it makes sense. Of course, why wouldn't you want to show me the stuff that you know that I want? But also, it definitely muddies the water of, okay, but what's true? What's true? What's real? What's a fact? If your set of responses is different than my set of responses, then how can we agree on what's true?
I think it's a really important call out. And as I first started to use Google, which was my search engine of choice after Alta Vista kind of fell out of favor, or Ask Jeeves, or insert some other extremely old search engine that I probably used a lot of. Yes, exactly. I started to learn more about Boolean searches. I started to spend more time thinking about as we probably both called it, Google foo, right? Oh, that Google foo, and that guy is pretty strong because he could search a website from the search bar, and then there was a lot of hacking that was occurring just using Google as a means. So with regards to using an LLM and using some of these capabilities, I use Perplexity because I do like the ability to flip between models, and I think I pay for it. I paid for ChatGPT first and switched over, but I've actually started to get more into prompt engineering and And in the beginning, I just thought, what a different style of job, right? A job that I just in the beginning was like, this is ridiculous, and then now I understand the value. And not to pick on my marketing friends who I love and dearly love, but the social media marketing person, to me, when I first heard that title, I was like, what the hell is that? That can't be a real job. And now I understand how specific and nuanced those sorts of things happen. So for me, I'm a big fan of CRIT. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that particular algorithm. It's context role interview task as a means for interacting with an LLM. And if I would like to, simple thing would be if I would like to write a policy, or I would like to write a blog post or something like that, where there's a very outcome driven thing. Using certain styles of using prompt engineering really does help me get to the result that I want in a better way. I like when I'm actually having a quote unquote conversation with one of these LLMs that asks me continuous questions, so that I not only am I thinking about my answer, where I'm coming from, but it also is asking me things that I can then take into consideration as I'm developing what the ultimate end product will be from my perspective. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I use both, and I actually do think I feel like Perplexity is better at that than ChatGPT at the follow-on questions. I mean, they both do it to some extent, but I feel like Perplexity is better at giving me questions where I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that follow-up question, but thank you. And unrelated completely, or not completely, but mostly, I've noticed headlines this week that both OpenAI and Perplexity are launching browsers.
I'm on the list.
Yes.
If they're listening, can you please get me up on the list?
Yeah. So that's interesting too, because it's already a reality that people who are paying attention have acknowledged that SEO has changed, search has changed, that and I mean, I do content marketing and content for a living, so like the traditional, I'm going to write a blog, I'm going to write a white paper, I'm going to create all this content, and I want to create a bunch of FAQs and stuff on my website, and that's how you rank on Google, doesn't work for the ChatGPTs of the world. And so as Google slowly kind of is fading into obscurity here, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I don't feel like they're really even in the race. I think right now I see Google as Sears when Amazon came along, or Kmart, or Toys R Us, or whatever, where they think they're too big to fail. They think I don't need to worry about that. I'm Google. Mm-hmm. Or like Microsoft in the early days of the web, like when Netscape hit, and they went, oh shit, we better make a browser because apparently that's a thing. So I think there is some hubris there of feeling like, you're so big that you can't be threatened. But as
they have the data though. The data is a big part of that story. And yes, it's funny. My wife uses Gemini pretty religiously. She loves it, and she has the ability to use Perplexity, but she just is comfortable with it. And maybe it's that Mars and Venus, right? Maybe that's what it is. We've each got our own our favorite planet, or whatever the case may be. I feel like if I was to spin in my chair right now, there'd be a new leader in the space. And if I was to spin my chair the other way, there'd be yet another leader there. It is an interesting time. A lot of my coworkers and people that I have the pleasure of working with, they were huge Arc browser fans, and Arc decided that they were like, that's it. We're done with Arc. We're going to build an AI browser. I haven't used any yet. I'm hoping that I get, leapfrogged. I don't want to pay $200 a month for a browser. I don't think that's in my best fiduciary responsibility as a member of a family. But I am really looking forward to how that changes. I would say, though, in line with some of the things you were stating earlier, that the Google results for search are they're just not necessarily what I need. I got to spend too much time scrolling before I get to the meat of the question.
You get to an actual result.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And I think but I think that if we think about maybe MySpace as a probably terrible analogy, but a MySpace scenario where you go on somebody's MySpace page and you were like, whose page is this anymore? Like, I can't tell. There's blinky lights and, chickens dancing across the screen and music that I hate and all that stuff. So I think that's I think where it's constantly evolving. But I don't think that I don't believe that there's anyone winning a very specific winner right now. The DeepSeek probably an event was one of those scenarios that we all thought we knew that like OpenAI was going to get it and they were going to win. And then all of a sudden DeepSeek came out and it was like, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. So much better. And it was built by a 12-year-old and he built it with $5 and his old Dell PC. And then, fast forward a few months later and we were like, so we just talk about DeepSeek as that threat that existed for a short duration of time. And it was just a method. It was more than just a method, but in theory, it was a method that was different. And now all of the models have the ability. I'm just enamored with the space, and I'm a big fan of using it. And that's been some of the most exciting. For
I
me.
definitely agree with you there, man. And it's funny because when I'm on LinkedIn in particular, I see extremes. There is a camp of people who are sure that this is going to cure cancer, solve world peace. We're gonna get to Mars by 2028, all because of AI. Mm-hmm. And then there's another camp that says this is purely snake oil. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's just math. It's just using probabilities, and there's nothing magic there. And why are companies having $1 trillion valuations with vaporware? And I'm like, okay, I see both extremes. I've also used a lot of these tools, and I'm here to tell you the answer is in the middle. There is a lot of potential. It does a lot of things. It's not magic. It's not going to cure cancer. We will not be on Mars by 2028.
Yeah, I'm optimistic for all of those things, but I'm also unfortunately a little bit more grounded, and I'm aligned to you there. It is wonderful to use. It is making my security team's lives better continuously. We are constantly exploring new ways to make things more feasible, and I look forward to the day where I am barely using a keyboard at all, right? Where I am, and my father and my mother, periodically they do that whole speech to text thing, and oh my gosh, I wish you could turn that off at a certain age. I'm being ageist, but I'm being funny, I hope. But I do think that that will, in many respects, that will be a nicer interaction. It is as awkward as snot to interact with one of these little pucks that sit in your corner of your house, right? Or I bought those Meta glasses to screw around with on a vacation. Turns out the battery's terrible, so they're going back. But the whole like, what did you do today? And I'm like, leave me alone, person in my ears.
Have you used the Perplexity voice interaction on your phone?
Once. It creeped me out a little bit.
Well, here's what creeped me out is I didn't realize that it stayed on past the query.
Yeah.
So like, I asked a question, it gave me an answer. I said, hey, this is great, because it's one of my main complaints against, I'm not going to say the name out loud because then I'll wake her, but Apple's one is that half the time that I ask a question, it says, oh, well, I found the answer, go look on your phone. I'm like, don't tell me to look on my phone. I'm talking to you verbally. Give me a verbal answer. You're like, if you found an answer that you're showing me on my phone, read it to me.
Google pays us too much money for me to read it to you. You have to go click on a Google link so that we can then justify
Perplexity actually gives you a verbal answer, and I was like, hey, this is great. So I love Perplexity for that. Yeah. But the first time I did it, I thought it was a one query and it was done thing, and then I was like doing something else. I don't know, I was making dinner or something. Mm-hmm. And I dropped an egg, and I was like, God damn it. And then Perplexity is like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And I was like, wait, why are you still listening to me?
You making my eggs? Get out of here. Yeah, no, it is. There's, I think a bunch of them now have that sort of extended conversational, item. The Meta glasses thing was a pretty interesting, I don't think Llama's the greatest model going, but I do think that the experience is neat. The battery was better and the cameras were better. And it was waterproof. That's actually really stupid that you can only barely get wet. If it was better and the next gen that comes out likely will be, I'll be hard pressed not to think about jumping in and making an acquisition of those things. I thought Google Glasses were as ugly as they were a really cool concept. I'm looking forward to being able to have a little bit of a screen or a message or something that I can have here. Because having to get a message, being told that I have a message, and it not telling me about that message sort of immediately. This is the Meta experience, not the Apple experience. Is a pretty crappy experience. Like, I don't want to be like, weirdo with glasses talking to now not headphones talking guy in the corner trying to find the message that I could faster pick up my phone. So it's still, workflows are still happening there.
Right.
But wouldn't it be cool to be able to acknowledge an alert that isn't necessarily bad? Like, hey, so and so is operating and they connected to your Okta instance via this VPN. It's like, well, yeah, they happen to use Nord on the weekends because they want to watch the BBC and they live in Germany. Like, I totally get it, right? And so, like, being able to just act that stuff would be pretty cool as those alerts come in. So I don't know that operators are all there yet, but I do think not long from now, our on-call staff will be less impacted when they're on call. They'll be able to quickly ascertain things. And I also think that some of these alerting systems will not generate like a SIM one-line alert that's like super sure if you read it and live it all day long, you get it, but more like, Sam coming in from Germany, coming on a NordVPN, happened to try to reset their MFA through Okta on this Saturday. We haven't seen them use Nord in 7 days. And it's like, well, at about 3:30 p.m. every Friday, Sam jumps on because Sam wants to watch, a favorite BBC show. So I'm actually not alerting. Now, but if it's abnormal to that, or they're using one of these other VPNs, Asterisk VPN, which is a VPN commonly used by the North Korean group that's doing the IT attack, that's a no, never, Sam, you're not using that sort of attack. And I think that will be for us a great way to leverage these technologies to normalize that alert, give me context, tell me about the attack path, and then read it out to me. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and I know, like we're over time because it's a great conversation. So I want to start to wrap up, but one of the things I want to come back to something you talked about way earlier, which was about the ability for an attacker to basically once they have your data, and actually that is one thing I was going to mention earlier, and this might be the thing that I lost track of, and that is they take your data, they threaten to release it, you pay the ransom. The thing is, you never have any way of proving that they no longer have your data. Like, not
easily.
Like,
no.
Like they can. What are they going to do? Give it back to you? It's digital. You don't know how many copies of that there are, and especially if you're dealing with Russia or China or a Russian or Chinese threat actor group, there's a high likelihood that data has already been shared with those governments, and it's not yours anymore.
No, that's the case. Yeah.
And but the threat actors have an ability to have data that they don't know what to do with. It has no real purpose, and just sit on it. And now with AI, you can start just kind of throwing all those things together and say, okay, well, here's this massive data set. Doesn't all go together necessarily. We're not even sure if it's connected. And let the AI figure it out. Let the AI go, okay, well, let me connect these dots for you. This goes to this and this goes to that. And that's another example of something that, like, we can do that too. I mean, it's kind of like the security graph analysis concept or whatever, like, yes, let's take all these different things, overlay them, and let the AI figure out how do these dots connect. So it has tremendous value for us, but it also has tremendous value for the threat actors. But it's one of the things that I think makes, when it comes to like a SOC analyst or whatever, it's one of the things that I think makes AI extremely useful, because I might be able to, as a human SOC analyst, I can sit there and sift through log files, and I'll notice, standard indicators to say, oh, let's flag that, let's look at that. But I can't do it at the speed and scale that an AI tool can. So if I can just dump all this data and have the AI very quickly connect the dots and say, yes, that's a you should look at that. That definitely shouldn't happen. That one's fine. That makes perfect sense. Like, that's a really good use of AI.
I think so. I also think, so adding on to that, I think we will have, as I like to use the term Microsoft, and we'll call it Tony Corp, And so like the ability for Microsoft's version of my own algorithm or my own trained model to be able to train very specifically on certain types or certain things that are very specific to me, enhancing my capabilities on top of the on top of the ones that we're getting. That's where I think really gives us both the taking a generic model that can parse or grok all the data. Then secondly, I can also do it more specifically to my business. And that's where we're really going to enhance here.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's also where I've said for years that I want the Apple AI and the Google AI and all the AI personal assistants to evolve to be more like Tony Stark's Jarvis. Like out of the box, yes, they're all the same. But after I've used the phone for a month, for a year, it should know me. It should know everything about my calendar. It should know who I like, who I don't like. It should know what foods I like. It should know which way I like to drive to the store. All of that information should exist. And therefore, a year from now, if I ask my AI one thing and you ask your AI the same thing, we should get different answers because it should answer it from my perspective. It should say, okay, here's the answer I'm going to give Tony because Tony likes to go to the store this way.
100% agree. Absolutely. So,
all right. Well, I mean, we went all over the place. So, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
I did.
But I will let you close with any parting thoughts. You can bring it way back to retail or whatever you want. But any thoughts you have for, I don't know, CISOs, IT practitioners in general, I guess, in specific, again, we're a few months out from Black Friday, Cyber Monday or whatever. But, if you want to bring it back to retail, it's like, okay, well, what should we be doing?
Well, I think first and foremost, we've sort of both agree that we really need to focus on actually using the AIs themselves to better learn and teach ourselves how some of the nuances within there really occur. I think secondly, the opportunity for us to put data in its appropriate hierarchy is really critical, specifically within the retail world. The data volumes are going to continue to grow. I think I read internally here and had a number of conversations with folks. We're at a 28% CAGR for data growth, which is just astronomical. That's just unheard of. It's unlike anything we've ever dealt with. Previously, early doors security for me, getting visibility into things was a lack of data, right? I have the inverse problem now, and therefore I think leveraging AI and appropriately sending my data to the places that I can use it best to, whether it's train my model or interact with it or alert on it or correlate on it. Those are today, the days are here. The days for us to do that are here, but it is about data architecture and us playing, a big part in that. I'm actually very, for obvious reasons, I'm very excited that, the company that I work for heavily helps companies in this specific regard. And as you change your opinion about where things go, or you change your purpose or your policies or your needs to move these things around, you have that capability. I probably would be remiss, since we've had such a large AI conversation and now talking about data movement more specifically, to say that one of our earliest AI products was actually building a data pipeline using much more natural language processing. I want to move firewall, blah, blah, blah data here to this S3 bucket and only include these types of alerts, and I can generate that pipeline super quickly. Great use case. I've got a bunch of others that are out there, but I think that's the one I'll share. So this has been a great conversation, Tony. I really appreciate the time we've had today.
All right, awesome. Well, enjoy your weekend. Take care.
You too. Be well.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.